Hey, this is a quick demo of making an Angular component embeddable using MCP-UI. So we have this beautiful polygon component that can generate any number of polygons with different angles, and it looks beautiful and it is very useful inside of our application, but now we want to make it accessible to any applications in the agentic web. How do we do that? Using MCP-UI. But no, really, how do we do that? How do we take this component and make it embeddable? Well, step one is a little bit in the name. It's called MCP-UI, so we need an MCP server. Fortunately, that is relatively simple. We open our server.ts file where we are defining all our server-side behaviors, and there we can import the MCP SDK. Armed with that, we can create an MCP server and connect it to our Express app. So now we have an MCP server, but it's not very useful. So let's make it more useful. Let's provide our angles tool. The angles tool is what will tell the agents that we want to provide some UI. We want to provide a tool, which is defined here, and it tells it all metadata it needs to know, including information on when to use this tool and how to pass inputs. In our case, the only input will be the number of angles. So we give it an example that if it's told to show 3 angles, then it should set the angles input to the number 3. We also have to find the respective resource, which is the actual rendered HTML representation. It's a lot of boilerplate right now. Most of it could really be shared across different widgets. To render the HTML, we are creating our own little server-side rendering stack here. So we define a custom bootstrap that is just bootstrapping our widget component and not the entire application. We don't want to worry about routing between different widgets right now. And also, in addition to the baseline server-side configuration, it is defining some custom providers. In this case, the provider is mostly there to provide the initial data, the inputs to the widget, to the Angular component, which it can extract via this injection token. We then render a mostly empty application that just contains this one widget and return it as an MCP-UI resource. The widget itself has some additional logic right now to access that initial data, which it uses to set up its input. In a real implementation, this would likely be done via some kind of wrapper component that provides this behavior for the embedded widget. Right now, I just inlined it in the widget itself. So how can we tell that this worked? Well, we can use the MCP inspector that has some patches applied to it to support MCP-UI resources directly. We connect to our local MCP server. We then select the Tools tab and say List Tools, and sure enough, here's our angles widget that we just defined. And then we can, the readability is really bad here. But then we are asked for angles, and we can say, well, we want to have 4 angles, so we would expect some kind of square. Run tool, and sure enough, it is rendering a square. If we change this to, say, 6, and run the tool again, what do we get? We get the best possible shape. So everything's working as expected locally. But now comes the interesting part. Can we actually make this work in ChatGPT? And it turns out, yeah. I set up a local tunnel that exposes this local instance via a public URL. And with that, I was able to go into the ChatGPT API, go into the ChatGPT UI, and create this tool. I just gave it the MCP URL in the public internet sense for my local running instance. And now I can say, using the Angular tool, show me 5 angles. And it will think a bit. It will realize that there is such a tool. This is the tool. I wanted to set it to 5 angles. That part doesn't quite work. It's also not interactive yet because for content security policy reasons, I think it is not actually loading the client-side script right now, so this is SSR only. But overall, it does work, right? We are seeing this UI rendered in our local Angular app now in ChatGPT. What if we want to use it ourselves? If we want to embed this in our own application? MCP-UI also comes with a client library. The client library is implemented in React, but it does have a web component wrapper, which we are using for embedding purposes. So UI resource renderer is the web component name. We import it in our main bundle, so it's available. And we set this to the custom element schema, so it doesn't cause any type errors. We can bind to the onUI action, which is the forwarded React add event through the custom element wrapper coming into Angular. We can set the resource to the fetched MCP response, and also we can allow it to automatically resize the iframe. By default, it would not do that. So if we look here, we have a resource which is using the MCP client library to call our tool locally, and then it's passing the angles from this input box in the UI. It extracts the widget contents from here, returns the resource, and that is what is then passed into the custom element. The MCP client is generated in a way that it properly handles connecting to the local MCP. It currently, during SSR, really literally calls itself via its public URL, which is not great. It really shouldn't be calling through the internet just to get something that's running in the same process. But that is to be improved. And yeah, now we have an MCP-UI widget that we can both provide and consume in this Angular app.